The 2018 Farm Bill came one step closer to reality last week when the House of Representatives passed its version. According to Nebraska Extension Policy Specialist Brad Lubben, there are a number of differences between both the House and Senate versions of the bill. A few of those differences include the Farm Income Safety Net, conservation, and the SNAP program. We talked with Brad Monday morning and asked him for an update on the 2018 Farm Bill.
Well, we now finally have a bill that has passed both the House and a separate bill that has passed the Senate here both in late June. So we can proceed to what's called conference committee, where we theoretically iron out the differences and move forward towards final passage.
Let's talk about some of the things that are in the bill. Where are the differences as you see them that are the important ones?
We can look at lots of issues in all of the titles of the bill, but remember there are four sort of fundamental areas where 99% of the spending is at. Commodity programs, crop insurance programs, conservation programs, and nutrition assistance, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Those are where some of the differences are that we can pay closer attention to and think about. In the commodity title, we have been living with what's called the ARC and PLC programs. We really do expect that to continue. There are some proposed revisions on the edges of those programs. Both the House and the Senate propose to adjust the ARC program in terms of the yield data, a push that farmers across the country were arguing for, to use more crop insurance data in that yield calculation. The Senate also proposes to slightly strengthen the ARC program by virtue of changing the yield formula to a trend-adjusted yield. So instead of a historical average, it's a trend-adjusted historical average, which should theoretically increase the guarantee a bit for producers. By comparison, the House doesn't do much to ARC other than the yield formula, but the House proposes a slightly higher reference price if and when market prices ever rebound above current reference prices. So the House does have some more focus on PLC, the Senate has more focus on ARC. They're relatively minor differences to be worked out here in conference.
How about conservation?
Conservation's a bigger difference fundamentally between the two. There have been arguments for trying to increase the size of the CRP program, given that it's shrunk down to its current cap at 24 million acres. The House proposes to bump that up to 29. The Senate proposes to bump it up to 25. How do you pay for more acres? One of the ways is a proposal to cut back on the rental rate that can be paid on those acreage caps. The House would cut that back to an 80% cap of 80% of local cropland rental rates to be the maximum CRP payment. The Senate would propose an 88.5% cap. So there's give and take in both. We'll see where it plays out. The Senate and the House do differ substantially, however, on working lands. Currently, we have this EQIP program, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, that provides cost share type assistance to producers to adopt new practices. We also have the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, that provides stewardship payments to continue doing good practices. The House proposes to eliminate CSP. It would roll the stewardship component into EQIP, but in the end it would give something like 2/3 of the current money going forward. The Senate fundamentally proposes to keep both EQIP and CSP in place. It proposes a minor cut to funding on both, but you have a very different vision of what conservation programs should look like going forward in the House versus the Senate.
How about in nutrition?
We are fundamentally left with the major difference in the Farm Bill between the two versions. The House proposed a substantial cut in terms of benefits by tightening up some of the eligibility and calculations. The House also made a major shift in pushing tighter work requirements, but supplementing that with a broad jobs and educational training program to help those individuals find gainful employment that moves them off of SNAP benefits over time. In the end, the House fundamentally spends about the same amount of money, but they fundamentally imagine that going to training that gets individuals off of assistance over time. The Senate fundamentally maintains current benefits and rules, tightens up some of the eligibility guidelines, and tries to eliminate some of the potential abuse or waste in the program. That still remains the major difference between the two that has to be sorted out.
So all of this has to be worked out in conference. What is the schedule? How is this all going to work out?
You know, now that we have a bill from both the House and the Senate, staff members in DC could already be working on differences. Conferees need to officially be named. That could happen here in early July, and then we move to formal proceedings that could really wrap up by August, or at least in August. We could see a final bill come back from that conference committee for consideration in both chambers before the current farm bill expires in September.
Do you think there will be a lot of conflict in trying to resolve some of these things?
Most of the issues, I think, are resolvable. There are differences clearly between the two bills across the spectrum, but they're the kinds of issues we always debate. One thing to mention, neither one fundamentally touches crop insurance. While there was a debate in both chambers, the program's effectively status quo. So there aren't major differences in the farm components of the bill. The big difference is SNAP, and the question to be resolved is, can you find a compromise version that can actually pass both chambers? That'll be the test that we get to watch for a couple months here.